AgriPack Farm Bureau endorsement meant the world to me. And for those of you who were a part of that, thank you very much. And those who you weren't, thank you anyway. We're going to work with you. We're going to be around to do good things for agriculture. You know, this is so important in this race. I happen to, sorry for my city clothes here today, but I was down in Detroit this morning on the Detroit Chamber event. And I was just telling this other group that the AgriPack endorsement has reverberated down into the city of Detroit, because they know farmers kind of know, they cut through the BS, if you will. And so it was an important endorsement for, we need somebody who's going to look out for agriculture, for Michigan agriculture and our set of issues back in Washington. So I was honored to get it. I'm going to work very hard to earn it. I appreciate it very, very, very much. Senator, you wanted to say something to help us kick it off?
Well, welcome to Victory Farms, and as you can see, during the harvest time, we don't have time to stop. We have to walk and chew gum at the same time. So if you got a little background noise, that's just a healthy, nutritional product being produced here at Victory Farms, shipping out throughout the Midwest. Because at the end of the day, I always say, food is health. And what we produce here is a healthy, nutritional diet for those who live in the Midwest, and that's why I'm eager to see Mike Rogers gain that Senate seat, because he can be that voice of Michigan agriculture, U.S. agriculture, because a lot is at stake. And because we feed the nation, we feed the world, and we need good leaders that will help us to fulfill that task.
Well, thank you, Senator. I figured maybe we could just go around real quick. I found it, this is why I love farmers. I come in, there's all these cameras here. All the farmers are over there. There's no one heck ever going to get in front of the camera. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for, this I think helps highlight agriculture, the challenges of agriculture, and why this is so important for the state of Michigan going forward. And you all can be a very important voice in that. So Scott, if you want to start off.
Can you speak up loud too? I want to encourage everybody, because there's a lot of background noise.
Hired at Edie Dairy Farm in Conklin. West Weesey done in Montague. We have greenhouses and wholesale retail, landscaping, and agriculture.
Wonderful.
Jordan Youngquist. I was with Youngquist Apple Orchards, or Youngquist Family Farm. Now I'm currently running for House of Representatives.
All right. Thanks for being here, Jordan.
Tim Krudoff, Krudoff Farms. We're in Kent City and Conklin.
Craig Vanderkalk, Burnups Equipment, so we support the ag industry.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Al Dietrich Orchards. We grow apples, cherries, asparagus.
Ditto.
Ditto.
Craig Shipping with Hogquest Farms and Cast Drain Guy and Raise Hogs.
Lisa Busker, hog farmer from Zealand, Michigan, and we also do cash crops.
Awesome.
Lori Traveling with Michigan Farm Bureau.
Jesse Mearman, I've got a small direct market dairy over by Hudsonville.
Wonderful. Great. But when you say direct, is that direct to consumer? Is that, yeah. So you don't sell to stores, you don't package and sell?
All on farm.
All on the farm. Awesome. So help me understand the challenges of a direct-to-consumer farm versus what some of these other folks do.
Well, right now, Michigan's got this amazing arrangement where if the customer owns the cow, so they actually own part of the farm, then they can get milk directly from the farm without any regulation at all. And that's an amazing situation, because like Roger was saying, we're selling nutrition.
Yeah.
We're not selling drugs, we're not selling ammunition, we're selling food. So the state that can trust our customers respecting us is an amazing thing. We like to maintain that privilege. I'd really like to extend that to all of us. If the customer trusts you enough and values you enough to go out to your farm, that's a big sacrifice. And to be able to enable the farmers to deal directly with the customer.
And what is the biggest hurdle to that? All the requirements they put on for preservation or something else? Pasteurization?
No regulations right now. As far as government hurdles, just trying to maintain the relationship, people working in conservation. Make sure people are educated about people are getting help. They're not getting sick, they're getting help.
Yeah, I like it. So you got to be pretty happy with this new twist of healthy foods, right, that they're talking about at the national level now?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's going with COVID. It's actually decreased the trust in government and it's increased the trust in farmers. So, not that it's going to put COVID on anybody, but it's turned the eyes of the
too. So this was last year, I guess the full year was the first year in the country's history that we imported more food by value than we exported. I just don't think we can continue to be a great country if we can't feed ourselves, and we should be exporting food, not importing food. And so one of the things that we hope to do when I get back there, when you all help me get back there, is start working on all of the rules, regulations, cost structure that the government is forcing on you that isn't really helping, but is adding cost to every deliverable that you have. And we talked a little bit about energy. I think Arden was the one who was talking about it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Just that electric rates keep coming up in Michigan, and that impacts all of us, consumers as well as the farmers. We use a lot of electricity in production, and it takes money out of your sales more than it used to. And then energy also is in everything that everyone buys. It's in the production of equipment. It's in manufacturing. It's not manufacturing, but it's in processing of food, and it's in transportation from the processor to distributors and to the retail. It's everywhere, and that has a lot to do with the cost to consumers as well as the cost to us.
Yeah. So not only are they paying more for the fuel to get what you have to do to get it off your farm and into the store, they're paying higher fuel to get to the store too, right? Energy rates wise? Yeah.
It gets passed on.
Yep. Can't not. What? How did you feel about the proposal for price setting in agriculture? When they came out and said we're going to, apparently farmers and big farms aren't doing it right.
Well, the first thing that I thought of is how do you do something like that? I think it's impossible for the government to say you're not going to sell it for any more than so much, so you're going to roll prices back. I'm old enough to remember Nixon trying price control. That was a disaster.
Mm-hmm. A more recent example might be Venezuela.
Yeah.
You go to you see pictures of their grocery stores. There's no food on the shelves. Right? That's what happens when the government sets your prices.
Amen. I agree. I agree, Mike.
What about labor? Anybody have any labor issues that?
Labor is an important part of specialty crops, especially apples, cherries, asparagus, vegetables are all specialty crops. Labor is a big part of our expenses. We have to get the labor to pick the commodities that everyone consumes in their grocery stores. We have to go through a program called the H2A program, which is a government program where we bring people in from other countries to help harvest these crops. It's a very expensive program, transportation, housing, and the wages paid equals in the $32 range. We actually got to pay more than we do a lot of UAW contracts. It's not sustainable. It's the commodities are not bringing that kind of returns back to the farm, and so it's just not sustainable to keep these farms afloat, paying these high wages that we're forced to, along with the government regulations. DOL inspections, we had 2 of them at our farm this year. We're regulated to death. We need to control regulations to keep things under control. I always think of Ronald Reagan's famous saying, we're from the government, we're here to help you. It's like, we just need to get rid of all these regulations and figure out how we're going to help societies limit these high wages that are not returning back to the farms. You'll see some doors closing.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, I thought this was a very interesting point, that we didn't have enough USDA inspectors, but they sent 5 labor agents to your farm during harvest and took you away from your farm for 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, that's true. The government has a great USDA food purchase programs, and a lot of commodities are sold to the school lunches and the prisons and all that. It's a great program to do it, to get your commodity and your product inspected. It's got to go through USDA inspectors. Well, they've made the regulations so particular to these commodities that there's not enough USDA inspectors to go around. So now loads have to be weighted, loads have to be delayed. We can't deliver to our customers because of USDA inspections shortages that are out there. We got all kinds of regulators out there watching our every move we make, but can we get inspectors to help push this crop into the processing community? Very difficult.
Al, if I can build on that, I know for our food safety inspection process, we had to reschedule 4 different times because of the lack of the inspectors. And believe me, they're doing what they can. In fact, when we had one of the inspections, the inspector said, can we work through the lunch hour? Because I need to keep right on moving because I won't that far behind. So actually, kudos to that team. They're forsaking their lunch breaks and making it happen because they know how critical it is. And yet, on the other hand of the equation, they seem to have more ample opportunity on the the enforcement component. I believe we got to balance those scales out.
Yeah, food safety audits. We're all about food safety.
Yes.
We're here to make sure everything is safe for our American consumers, but we go through 4 food safety audits a year at our farm. It takes one whole person just to do food safety audits.
And where you were, can you tell me about the labor you had? Didn't you say 3 or 4 or 5? Forget the number of labor folks came and kind of took over your office for.
Yeah, DOL is very active this year. Number of farms have been audited through Department of Labor. The 5 agents come in and they show their badges, and they pretty much have to go through all your books. They interview employees. It's a disruptive part of our production,
And that's they did it during harvest.
Yes, right during the busy time of the year always.
Roger, can you just flesh that out a little bit? How would you do it if you could figure out the right ratio for USDA and how do you get more inspectors? Is this a lack of interest? Why don't we have enough inspectors?
Well, I think there's a desire, but I think it's how are the departments being funded, and even at the administrative level, what focus are they putting on it? I feel that when we're looking for a food safety inspection being done, I think that ranks pretty high. Also, we want to make sure our Department of Labor, they need to do the job correctly too. But I even heard of coming on weekends. Wow, how can they have people available on weekends for that component and yet have not the other component for the food safety inspections, nor the other inspection process for the quality of loads? And it just seems the scales are outbalanced. So that's why I believe we need strong leadership at the national level, like Mike Rogers, you can demonstrate there and bring that voice of balance to this equation that it's lacking here in Michigan, and I'm sure it's lacking throughout the nation. And that's why I'm supporting you and why I'm excited behind getting a Mike Rogers voice in Washington, D.C. that will help everyone at this table to fight those issues that seems like where has been our voice? That voice has been lacking. And there again, we need a balance. We got to make sure that our good team members and labor aspects are being treated fairly, and there's always have to be that type of enforcement. But there again, let's make that equation equal, and I'm sure as you take your notes, that'll be one of your priorities, making sure that Michigan agriculture and American agriculture can grow and succeed without having these antiquated, minute things holding us back.
Yeah. Somebody earlier was talking about. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to share the H2A program is really important, especially for specialty crops. But as a pork producer, we really rely on year-round labor. And the TN visa program has been problematic for us because a lot of those visas.
I'm sorry. The what?
TN visa.
Oh, TN.
Yes, that's been problematic because a lot of those visas have been denied. And the reasons for it are really kind of trivial reasons. The reasons because there's not clear, consistent guidelines that we have as producers. And we really need to work with the State Department and hopefully have somebody as a voice in Washington, D.C. that can help us make sure that we can get those workers here. Because people here in the United States don't want to do the jobs that we have on our farm.
Yeah.
And we need labor that can come here, be here year-round, and be
So what would be the change that fixes that? Do you know?
Like I said, it's making sure we have that clear, consistent guidelines so that we can make sure when we have people applying, we can get those things to happen and make sure that process goes smoothly, because when there's that breakdown, we're trying to do what we can, but if we're kind of jumping through hoops, not having those guidelines in place to make sure we know what's expected of us as we're trying to hire these employees, we need to have that.
What is the if you don't mind me asking, what is the process you go through for a TN visa?
That I haven't been intimately involved with at our firm. I don't know if you or Tim, do you hire any?
We don't currently hire any, but I have friends that go through it. And what they say, so these TN visas, so H-2A is kind of a seasonal help. TN visas year-long help, and so that helps a lot more of other industries in agriculture, whether it be row crop farmers, especially in livestock farming. And so they can stay here for multiple years at a time. But these guys will be going home and, to spend a week or whatever with their family. And when they go to come back into the U.S., their visas are getting denied to come back in the U.S. And I've been in D.C. and we've had conversations about this, and it's very trivial about why they're being denied. And so the friends of mine that are using the programs are saying that you have to have it specifically spelled out exactly what jobs they are doing here, and they have to know how to explain that when they go in for their interviews. And so it's really hurting, because these guys will be here for 2-3 years, they'll go home, and then all of a sudden they can't come back. And they don't realize that, when they went home, they didn't realize they were not going to be allowed to come back.
And they've been good employees.
Yep.
The employer would say they're good employees.
Yep.
So
It's a
no problem.
Great program for employers using them.
Yeah. Do they ever check? Like, why did they deny it without picking up the phone and calling somebody?
Well, conversations that I've heard is that they're denying it because they need the help back home. They don't want to send these good employees back to the United States and have them work here.
You mean so the host countries deny it?
Correct.
Oh, that's interesting. So when they apply for their visa through
Through
country
their host
X,
country coming into the U.S. But we need to find ways of working with a lot of them coming in from Mexico, ways of working better with Mexico of getting those people back here.
is it primarily a Mexican issue?
Yeah.
Is it are they just trying to cause us problems, or are they?
That could be part of it. I do think that part of it could be they need the help back at home, maybe if they create more jobs back at home. But get kind of circling around back to that, Mike, you talked about exports, and I think everybody here, commodities that we raise are exported. Apples are exported, milk's exported. We rely so heavily on export markets, but the standards that we're held to that other countries that are importing in the United States are not. I think that creates a big issue for all of us here at the table. And I think we need to have the same standards of products coming into the United States as what we're required here to raise our products with.
So somebody was telling me about we're losing the onion market to Mexico. They're growing them really close to the border, not meeting our same standards, and selling them for a very cheap price coming across. Have you all heard of this problem? Everybody heard of this problem?
It may be onions, it may be blueberries, it may be asparagus. So
can you kind of explain that?
Multiple crops.
Yep, multiple crops. Each individual crops can have its own unique story behind it.
And so what are they doing that's different that makes it cheaper?
So some of the one thing I think a common thread's been here is the regulatory pressures. Again, we want to make sure we grow a healthy, nutritional, safe product, but sometimes we can't even get answers. We might be, I always say time is money. While we're waiting for inspections, while we're waiting for this determination or this to be answered, and while they're not going through those same hurdles, again, I go back to the balanced playing field. And this gives us a balanced playing field. I'm a strong believer in the USMCA trade agreement. I think that helped move us forward because remember, we're trading with friendly nations and that component. But the key is sometimes we are competing on some of the specialty crops of some other South American countries, Turkey with the cherries areas, and some of these are not quite as friendly as our neighbors across the border. So those are factors that got to be taken in place, and at the end of the day, Do we want a healthy, nutritional, safe, secure, and also affordable products grown here in the United States? And we can produce them at economic competitive areas as long as the government doesn't tie one hand behind our back. We want to be able to work with both hands in front of us, and that's where it seems to be more frustrated of late. They're putting that other hand behind our back, and we just can't compete on that world scale.
So it's cost imposition, it's inspectors, and of course artificially high energy rates, I believe.
Yep.
Right? We don't.
Death
Our
by
energy
1,000
rates don't.
cuts.
Yeah.
Death by 1,000. Yeah. Energy is.
So I heard another story up on cherry farmers that Turkey and China were shipping cherries to Brazil. Brazil, sprinkles a little water on them, says they're processed, and brings them into the United States. They don't grow any cherries, and they can do it at a price that makes our cherry producers not competitive. So to me, that's an enforcement issue. Like, why aren't we enforcing kind of the current law? I mean, is anyone else running into something like? I mean, I know the cherry farmers were telling me if this keeps up, you won't have Michigan cherries at the cherry festival in 4 or 5 years. You'll have Chinese and Turkish cherries at the cherry festival in 5 years. Which I don't know why we would do this to ourselves artificially. Is anyone else bumping into that problem or familiar with that problem? No.
Yep. Foreign imports are a problem with any of our produce industry. Apple juice concentrate comes in from China. It costs under what we can grow it. It's just about in every commodity that Americans consume. And to make fair trade, it's a very complicated issue. International laws are very complicated. We've been told, we've toured the Hill many of times and gotten no results because it is a very complicated issue. And I don't have an answer for it. It is a difficult problem. It's a situation where it's going to put American farmers out of business if something isn't done.
And it's more than just like fruits or specialty crops. It's across the board, right? I was a little surprised to hear we lost to the onion. It happened to be onions. I was talking about that, so that's the only story I'm telling you. But that seems surprising to me because it happened so fast. Because they were, and that's what some of the water issue I guess they're getting into down there about the Rio Grande. They're taking water out of the Rio Grande, and everybody's complaining, but it's for their onion crops and apparently other crops down there as well. And bringing them across at just a fraction of the price, you can't compete. Seems to me we better find a solution to this unless we want to buy all our food from other countries.
To add to that, the cost structure that they have is different. We talked about the cost of the H2A program here, but like in Mexico, I'm sure they don't have a similar H2A program, but I understand that for their need for labor in harvesting produce and working in the fields, they have migrants coming from Guatemala. I'm sure they don't protect them at the same level as we protect the H2A coming in.
Sure, the housing standard is very different. Yeah,
so it's all in the cost structure, in other countries compared to what we have. We're a big part of it.
Any thoughts on how you would fix that problem? Require at least minimal standards for that importation of food?
Yeah, that'd be part of an answer. I don't know.
So, I many years ago, before it was very popular, I introduced it was called countervailing duties, but basically what it was a reciprocal tariff on China. If you're selling us products that was stolen with our intellectual property, there should be an extra penalty for that. And if you penalize, sugar beets going into China at X tariff, we should be able to punish your finished product coming back into the United States. I like the idea of reciprocal tariffs because I think it helps level the playing field, and then you have to compete on your own. But I wonder if you could work out a schedule of, hey, listen, their standards are so much lower, we think that's a factor of X. We're going to charge you a tariff of X to make an even playing field for, not to make money, but just to make the cost structure the same. Might be one way to do it. Well, first of all, I'd like to reduce the level of cost structure here. I just think that's where we got to start. That's something we definitely can control. structured here. Do you think that would work, or is that a problem, or is that?
I think just on the energy side of it, so we have operations in Indiana too, and our electric cost in Indiana is almost a third of what it is in Michigan. So the whole green energy kit.
Can you say that again? What?
Our cost of our electric in Indiana is almost a third of what it is in Michigan. And so this whole kick of getting green energy is just doing nothing but driving up our cost. So from a cost standpoint, the more we can drive down and make competition, whether it's drill baby drill, whether it's putting in more nuclear power plants, whether it's repairing the hydroelectric dams we have,
Yep.
create more power sources, that'll drive some of our costs down. Our fertilizer is another thing. A lot of our fertilizers derived from the petroleum industry. So you drive down the cost of petroleum, now that should help bring down some of the cost of our fertilizer inputs.
Yeah.
So that'll help us compete. The labor thing, that's got to get that's a regulatory thing. That's got to be driven from the top down. As some other people said here today, there's a lot of the labor that we use on the farms we're not going to get domestically. So we got to import that labor in. So we got to make that get competitive. And then of course the exports. We got to work on making, if other countries have certain products that we can't raise competitively here, or it's the seasonal crop, then we have to work with them on it. But we also have to have them countries meet the same requirements of what we meet when they're shipping their products into our country.
Yeah, I also think it's a good way to get around this problem where Turkey and China are dumping in the market in Brazil. It would be very easy to say, guess what? Dumping is a problem, right? That's an unfair trade practice. We can make up a reciprocal tariff based on your unfair trade practice. So it'd have to be just broader than a straight tariff for tariff. Mm-hmm. But if you could build it in so that you can account for the kinds of ways they're cheating around our system, I think that could work. At least give you a fighting chance, right? Now then you got to compete like everyone else, but at least it gives you a fighting chance to do it. I just worry that the world's doing this not necessarily by accident. When China can produce more food, I know they're in the apple market out west. They're causing real problems for our farmers here domestically, and we know it's subsidized. My argument is, if that's the case, then we have to find some way to level that playing field. I think it could work. When I did it, candidly, I was doing it for manufacturing. I had manufacturing in mind because the Chinese were just killing us. They would subsidize auto parts to the point where our guys were like, can't do it. I mean, we're gone. And we were watching these small tool and die shops, this would have been the early 2000s, drop like flies. I mean, they were just going away as fast as, I couldn't tell you, the sale of computer milling machines, which are pretty expensive pieces of equipment even back then. Normally it would be like this thick. That thing got like this thick in Michigan alone, because these companies were going out of business because of unfair competition in China. So my argument was, hey, we need to kind of fix this. Mm-hmm. And I'm a free trader, but I'm a fair trader. It's got to be fair or it ain't free. Anyway, I just think that might be something we'd have to play around with. We certainly wouldn't do it without input, but I think that might be one way we could start leveling that playing field, but we also have to go after the regulatory burden they're putting on you here. Mm-hmm. And if they can send 5 labor agents, there's probably four of those agents could go work for USDA. We need food inspectors. Not sure how many labor inspectors we need around the state, country.
Just to add to that, I think a lot of what farmers and agriculture is facing is an administrative state, and it's become a fourth branch of government outside of what our founding fathers envisioned. And this administrative state is getting a lot of regulatory authority, even outside the legislature. And so I'm excited to think of you there in Washington standing up for these farmers, because that's what one of the legislator's jobs to do, the legislative branch is to do, is to push back against this, what I see as out of control administrative state and these departments that are going beyond what the legislature gave them authority to do. And we're seeing court cases work their way through all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And, the Chevron doctrine that came back in the 80s and suggests that, if there's a disagreement between administration, a bureaucratic administration in their departments, and the farmers, they need to bend towards what the department has decided. And that's reverse from what it should be. It should be we the people, through the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House, are in control of these departments. And through legislation, they allow what these departments should be doing. And what's happening is the departments have grown beyond what has been allowed to them through the legislative process. So it's a real problem for farmers, and I feel for farmers almost every day, and I'm one on my own farm too, but it just feels like government's is just stepping on us continually, and whether you can't get an inspector to come out and sort of help you go through those next steps, get your crops inspected so you can move them on, or they're standing in the doorway kind of threatening you. In both ways, it's keeping us from producing food in the United States.
Would you argue that the two reasons that we have to import more food than we export would be regulations and then trade enforcement effort, or lack of trade enforcement? I mean, what else? I mean, the costs are obviously one of those, but energy costs and other things.
Also, current manipulation. Remember, when you're competing with a strong U.S. dollar, and some of the nations, I think, out there artificially keep their currency cheap because then they can leverage that component. So that's a big factor. I know we ship to Canada, and Canada also ships into the East Coast market, but sometimes there'll be a 30% differential in that currency, and that can make a big difference to what markets are available or what markets we're competing in.
One of the things that I've been noticing when we talk about exports and imports, we can export our produce, right? Whether it's specialty crops, whether it's pork, whether it's beef, whatever it is that we're exporting, it's held to a really high standard. Mm-hmm. And that's wonderful. That's what we want. We want really healthy, amazing produce to come out of our farms. The issue is when we export it, what are we getting in trade? Most of the time it's not other commodities coming back as far as foods and goods coming back. It's trinkets, it's machine goods, but it's not food. So then the food comes in on a lower scale, lower regulations, under a different trade. It has nothing to do with trading apples for apples. It has to do with what's fair, what are we trading it for? And so the regulations that we have of the imports that are coming in, first, it's not the same as what we're giving them. And second, the regulations of the products that we're receiving are not to our standards that we have to export. And that's a big part of it. If it was apples to apples, oranges to oranges, exactly on the same level, same playing field, that'd make a big difference in the prices here, and make it so that we can actually afford to keep produce instead of exporting that, keep it in our own, because it'd be the same price. Why would we bring it in from other countries if we could supply our own for the same price?
Is the lack of movement of a farm bill a problem, or is this a silver lining? Is it hurting? We haven't had one for 2 years. I'm just curious, is that an issue, or maybe it's not an issue? Maybe not passing a bill is a good thing. No thoughts?
Not passing a bad bill is probably passing a bad bill is probably worse than keeping the current bill we have.
Yeah.
So
to some degree, keeping the standards you have today are probably okay.
Yeah.
The farm bill, probably they've been working on it for 2 years, but the federal milk marketing orders, there are some changes that are proposed that will be included in the new farm bill when it's passed, to modernize some of the milk marketing order issues. And so that probably would be a good thing to get it passed for that, and how it might affect the dairy industry.
Makes it easier to.
There's several things in the milk marketing order that the milk is very, very regulated on how it's priced. Prices are basically determined by supply and demand on the exchange when the wholesale products are bought and sold. But the formula for determining our own price is really federally regulated with certain set of standards, and I can maybe help you with that a little bit later on.
Yeah, I'd like to understand that.
Yeah. So that's one thing that will come out of the new farm bill. They'll probably deal with that when it happens.
So I'm getting the sense that the federal government is your best friend in agriculture. Okay, I'm just lighten up. I'm trying to get. You know how hard it is to get a farmer to snicker.
I'm trying to put. Yeah, I'm trying to put the smile. Yeah. No, you're well put.
Like with the farm bill, one concern again pork producers have is that Prop 12.
Is the
Prop 12?
Prop 12?
Yeah.
And just the regulations they have that would that basically it could create a patchwork across the United States if other states follow in that. And so we had hope, and when we went to Washington D.C. this past spring, we talked a lot to Samuel's office and also to Slaughter's office about hopefully putting some language that would help address that issue. And from what I understand, and I know your follow-up question is what the language is, but
No,
I'm not entirely sure, but the House does have language in there that would help with that. I don't think the Senate version does currently have that, but the hope, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I know that they're working on that, and that would be something that if that farm bill does get passed, we would hope for pork producers would be in there, because it's not even really just a pork producer issue, because as soon as this happens to pork, every industry is going to follow, because they're going to figure out that they did it to us. And as a farmer, we can't sustain and keep jumping hoops to make sure that we have barns that are capable of raising pigs that every single regulation is.
So help me understand Prop 12. So it tells you exactly how you have to raise your hogs.
Basically, it's telling us the size of hens we need inside the barn for our gestation and our pairing. And with that, basically, if another state decides it needs to be bigger, then we need to remodel our barns again. If
Even
another
here,
state,
because you're selling to others.
because we're selling. And so right now, I mean, there's some pork producers that currently have Prop 12, I guess, approved barns, and not all producers can do that because we built barns not that long ago. We were within regulations at that time, but now we would have to remodel those barns to be able to sell pork into California. So if that happens across the United States with other states jumping on and saying, well, we want this size. And it would be one thing if these were based on any scientific evidence, and if the veterinarian, if they said this makes sense, let's do this, but it doesn't. It's actually proven that it's not actually healthier for the pigs. It's proven that there's more fighting going on. Just there's things that it doesn't make sense. And as soon as that hits our industry, it's going to hit other industries. It's going to hit dairy. It could just continue to snowball.
So Prop 12, California passed Prop 12. California is the biggest, obviously it has the highest population in the United States and is the biggest consumer of pork in the United States. Their pork consumption has plummeted. The cost of the pork in the store for the consumer has gone through the roof, and the pork consumption in California has plummeted. And as Lisa said, there's no science behind this. In fact, the American Veterinary Association came out, opposed it, and if they don't change, Secretary Vilsack even said that the Congress has to fix this in the Farm Bill. Otherwise, this is going to be messed through all across the country. And they started with the pork industry, but it's going to come into a lot of other industries. And because every state, Maine can have their regulation, Massachusetts can have theirs, Florida can have theirs, and if we as pork producers, we're going to go to a different market, well, now all of a sudden we have to completely remodel our facilities, costing millions of dollars to go to that market, and then a year down the road after we remodel, then they change their mind and they move to something different. So even Secretary, like I said, even Secretary Vilsack said there's got to be a fix for it in the Farm Bill.
So we saw this with chickens when they artificially did these runways and said they got to have the runways, so they built the runways, and then they came in and said, nope, it's not big enough. And so they exposed the chickens to other, birds, basically, when they did that. Sure enough, we've seen this rise in avian flu in the birds. We saw it right here in Michigan, where they had to put down 6 million birds. Yeah, one farm. I mean, you want to talk about a spike in the cost of eggs? That was it, right there.
There's food inflation.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, as he told me, the hens actually like to stay in the hen house. I don't know why we do all this. It's kind of dumb. And they have a choice.
Yeah.
You don't have to go out there, or they do, or they can. And he said they just don't. But when they end up out in the yard, it only takes one because of other bird droppings and other things. It infects these birds. I mean, have any of these people who ever come see you worked on a farm? I mean, who comes up with this? I think Prop 12 was designed to do away with pork farming, honestly. I think they had an intention of dropping pork production in the state. That's what worries me.
And on top of it, know who it affects us at this table, but no, it affects the 300 million hardworking men and women in this country when it comes to when they get that checkout lane and their high cost of groceries. It affects us, but it affects our customers. And when it raises that price up to that level that they no longer can afford to purchase that, and they have to start making those decisions, it puts us out of the market, but ultimately it's those hardworking men and women at their local grocery store, and they have to put that back in the cart because they can't afford that at that checkout counter.
And you look at where the money comes from to fund some of these ballot initiatives. To your point, they would rather not see agriculture happen. They'd rather us all, not have the choice of what food we eat. They want to make that decision for us and price it right out of the market.
The problem is too, is they want all these, guidelines or regulations, but they don't realize the consequences from it. So like you said, when they go to checkout lane, they don't realize, oh gee, this costs us money. It's like, well, you guys, this is what you wanted, caused us a lot of stress, a lot of money, and at the end of the day, they ain't smart enough to realize it's affecting them at the end of the day too.
Those costs get passed
Those
on.
costs get passed on to the consumer.
So you're not thrilled with, a major political candidate saying it was big producers charging too much because they were gouging?
Right.
I think you're hearing it from the people who are growing it, producing it firsthand, what's creating the issue.
Yeah.
Right at the farm, you're hearing the message.
One other thing that kind of bothers me, not to change the subject.
No, this is good.
The whole CAFO thing. Are you familiar with the CAFOs?
No.
Concentrated Animal Feeding Operations. And that's governed by EGLE. And we have these yearly inspections and all these guidelines we have to go through. And there's no common sense put into that program, but it causes anyone that has CAFOs a lot of stress. And it does not encourage the next generation to step up, add more animals because of all the regulations with the CAFO farm. And
What are they trying to? What do they tell you they're trying to fix?
well, what they want to do is basically they are concerned about us polluting the environment, and so they're trying to monitor our farms for us. And it's a lot of wasted money that they spend on this program. And if I had a problem, I don't want to deal with Eagle. I mean, they just it's a waste of money, in my opinion. I mean, us farmers really do care about the environment in our farms, and but when they come out and do these inspections, a lot of it is evaluated on your paperwork, which I get. You got to do the stuff right, but they are quick to find any little problem with your paperwork and throw the book at you. And now I just got an email just in the last month that they want to do these inspections, and it's going to be just randomly whenever they feel like it's convenient for them. So they're really looking to put us out of business is what they want to do. They want to come out, find us, and find something wrong with our
Farm. So
And I would say most other cables are doing a really good job. And we talked earlier, there's some cables that probably have some issues, but they don't do nothing about those farms. They target, they go after all of us, and yet there's some that we question. It's like, how can they pass? But yet the ones that, they target us all, I guess I'm saying.
Yeah. So how many different inspectors can show up on your farm? So I got CAFOS and labor and USDAs. Am I missing any? Anytime they want, apparently.
We were a small farm and we had 6 different agencies I counted at one time. Could be labor, it could be USDA, Michigan Agriculture. I counted 6 different agencies. We were a small organic farm. We were dealing with 6 different ones.
That sounds efficient.
And some of them are conflicting as well. We've had those times when the health department will say you got to do it this way, and then the township might have a different answer, the USDA or the MDA, and sometimes, you know, I'm the bad guy if I point that out. I realize that you've got to just say okay when they come in and say yes, I'll do it that way. You can't say, well, the other guy tells me I got to do it differently. So sometimes it's a no-win, it's a lose-lose.
The meat processors are under pressure right now from our Michigan, but USDA is asking them to increase capacity. And they're saying we're not increasing capacity until we get some clarification for what is coming at us from the Michigan Department of Agriculture and our Eagle department. So, you know, they're scared of what Michigan's doing, and USDA is asking them to increase capacity. We all know what happened during COVID and the need for the ability to process animals, and they're not going to increase capacity in Michigan until we get clarity of what's going on in the state.
How many farms do you think are on the edge? We lost 140,000 farms across America in the last 5 years. Do you think we're under pressure here? We're going to lose some farms under the current? Everybody's
Well, I
saying
think
yes?
there's a lot of, like myself, farmers who got gray hair. How about who's going to step up to replace us gray hair farmers that, you know, looking forward to retirement? And is the retirement just to sell the operation out for development or other aspects? If we don't have a strong economic environment for the younger folks to take over, we'll lose the farms. The farms will be converted to other entities in this area, no development, other aspects. So, yeah, we have to make sure that we have opportunities for the younger generation to come in and take on this.
In Michigan in 2023, there were about 1,100 dairy farms, licensed grade A dairy farms at the beginning of 2023. And at the end of 2023, there was 150 less. We lost almost 15% of the dairy farms in Michigan in 1 year.
150 less.
150 less out of 1,100.
Wow. And what happens to those farms? Are other farms buying them, or are they?
Many of them are become crop farms. There's no more cows on those farms. The cows are bought by farms that are expanding. The
Consolidations.
milk has stayed about the same, but the landscape of what was known for decades as a traditional dairy farm, family dairy farm, has changed dramatically.
And here's an interesting point. So some of the regulators, especially I think on the environmental side, would rather we have smaller farms, but their own regulations are forcing consolidation because the smaller ones can't comply. They don't have the ability to, hire someone to comply with that. So they're actually forcing the small farms out, and you lose the variety. You lose the strength of agriculture.
The community.
Yeah.
Yeah. A community with 100 farmers is a much stronger community than the community of just a couple that are left. And that's what you see throughout the state of Michigan, throughout the Midwest. And it affects the school systems, it affects the local hardware store, it affects the vitality of rural America.
Is there any agency that collects all? So I have 6 agencies poking around your farm. Does anybody know and anywhere else in the government there are 6 agencies poking around your farm? Is that a thing? And should it be?
I don't think they really care. They're just there to do a job, and they're forgetting what it takes to actually protect the environment and not stopping the real pollution, because it's just filling paperwork out, and I don't know. It's a loss of focus for sure.
So I proposed along the trail here that any time that the federal government asks like a social media platform to curtail whatever, right? They're going to say don't prevent something, which I argue, if you watch the way they did it, was censorship on the wrong end of it. Is that information had to be reported by the company back to the Republican and Democrat of the Oversight Committee simultaneously. So there is some check in the system. Because right now there's no check in the system. I just wonder if there might be a way to do something similar with agriculture. Like if you're showing up at these farms, you got to tell somebody, like the Senate committee, both Republican and Democrat, keep the checks in the system so people can track what's going on. I mean, how would you wouldn't know that necessarily. I mean, you're on the farm, but the guys from Detroit, they're not going to know anything about that. I don't know, it might be a bad idea.
something has to be out there.
Just some check at this. This seems ridiculous.
And while we're on this topic, I think government is slow to adapt to new technology. There are things that, as AI comes along with food safety components area, I think we're missing some, and all this regulatory agencies. An agency doesn't want to put themselves out of business, but what the agency may have had substance or purpose 20 years ago, but have we moved along and adapted better policies? Does that need to exist and have a review? In other areas, we may have to actually step it up. But I do believe that in these government agencies, they're lacking accepting the possibility of what's new technology. And one area I think in the state of Michigan, we're dropping the ball with biodigesters. This great technology from Europe, developed there. It can clean up our water systems, and yet they just can't get the permitting for this process. So great.
And what is it called?
These biodigesters.
Biodigesters.
Yeah. And I think some other can build up on that component there too. But it's a nice process that's, came in from Europe. Of course, they had those high standards there, and especially in water quality, and yet it seems we can't move the needle in certain parts in certain regions. I don't know if anybody wants to build on that conversation.
Yeah, it's the
Luke, you've been
technology
working
that's
it.
happening across the rest of the world mostly, especially in Europe and even New York and California, as far as progressive states. And here in Michigan, these biodigesters just really are having a terrible time. And I think, for the most part, the new considered ones aren't being built. Mm-hmm. And this is collecting methane.
And we have the research at MSU. Michigan State University has one on campus, and yet our government agencies seems to be not willing to work with our land grant university and moving that needle forward.
Is anyone here familiar with what happened to the community digester that was in Fremont?
I heard a little bit about that.
A little bit about that. The community got together and they were going to have biosolids from farms and from other sources, maybe from the city, and some maybe some food processing for producing methane. And they had such a tough, and they built the thing. They had such a tough time with the inspections and regulations that they ended up shutting it down. I don't know all of the details.
And it was a biodigester?
Yeah, just this last January.
It was in Fremont.
So it's bringing in all food waste products
Food waste products.
and utilizing that to create energy, back to the energy thing.
Yes.
So it's utilizing that food waste products to create energy, methane, and they couldn't get along with Eagle, if I remember correct, and so they ended up shutting down.
They hate methane.
Regulations shut it
They
down.
absolutely hate methane. They're trying to shut down the pumps, those single, marginal wells.
Mm-hmm.
They want to shut those down in 4 years. Let me tell you why that's a problem. I didn't know this before I started poking around with this, that those marginal wells, on average, in Michigan, about 5 barrels a day. There are 700,000 of those wells across the United States. If you start shutting them down like they plan to do, and it's over methane, even though it's not based on methane at the pump, it's based on what happened in Texas in the 1970s. It's your government at work. If they shut those down, that's about 10% of our daily production of oil. What is that going to do to the price of energy? I mean, it makes no sense. Some of these things, they're not working in concert. They're working against each other. And what the state did, this is where you ought to go beat on them, Senator.
Give me my working orders.
Yeah, exactly. Is they increased the bond payments. So what they're doing is trying to increase the costs to where it doesn't make sense to run 5 barrels a day. That's what they're doing. The feds are doing the methane permits, raising it up, jacking it up, and the state is raising the bond
Sounds like
requirement.
almost what they're doing to the farmers.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't want
They're
you,
doing
they're
too
going to
well.
find a way to get
So-
you. You know, my dad had a great saying. He said, "Listen, if you don't send somebody to Washington, Washington's going to send somebody for you." So maybe we can send me to Washington. I'll have your back.
Sounds
in
good
November.
here.
I appreciate it. I know we've kept you long. Is there any closing thoughts that anybody might have on this? And I hope, by the way, I'm going to put you on the spot. I know this is not your thing. I hope that the press would take a minute and talk to the folks who are actually, running tractors and trying to grow food to sell to not only our communities and feed the world and the challenges that they have. It would be an important time, if they would do it, okay, to have you just say a few words on this. It's really important that we reconnect farmers to the rest of the community. I mean, you ask people, you know, in Southeast Michigan where their food comes from, I bet you half of them couldn't tell you. I've never seen such a disconnect. And somehow we got to reconnect people to farms, to agriculture, to where their food comes from. To me, otherwise it lets government agencies do this nonsense and because their only thing they're hearing is the government agencies there to protect them. I'm not sure it is in all the cases. I think it's doing some real harm. And if we can't feed ourselves in a nation, we will cease to be a great nation. We have got to feed ourselves, and we need to export food to help feed the rest of the world too. So, closing thoughts. Don't be bashful. You got to go up and talk to one of these cameras. I know somebody out there is going to want to talk to a farmer. Hey, there's one. We'll take it. All right, guys. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much. Thanks for what you do. Don't give up on farming. I know I talked to somebody here, I won't embarrass him, who wants his grandson to inherit his farm. And if you look at the current trajectory with the way they're trying to increase estate tax next year, well, some people want to increase the estate tax. The additional tax in a whole slew of regulation. In the last 4 years, there's been $1.6 trillion of new regulation in the economy. Now, if anybody, I don't know anybody thinks this is a good idea. Even the people who are suffering under it, who thought maybe it was once a good idea, doesn't think this is a good idea. So I think we have a lot of work to do in a short period of time to get this right, to make sure America's on right. So think of that. First time in history we've import more food than we export. Build more foreign cars in America than domestic cars. First time the interest payment on the national debt is bigger than Department of Defense. It is the first time that we have, did I say over $1 trillion in credit card debt? Which means people are buying groceries at 23% interest. It's unsustainable. Their electric bills are high. The Chinese are building 5 warships to every one of we build. We got some problems. And we got to get started now. And I'll tell you where it should start, on every family farm in America. I found more common sense on one farm than all the committee rooms back in Washington, D.C. combined. So thanks for coming out. Thanks for sharing. This is really important for me. And if you guys will have ways to get a hold of me, if you have any better ideas, comments, questions. And this is time not to be bashful about the challenges in agriculture in Michigan and America. I worry if we get this so wrong, it's going to be really hard to get it back. So we got to do it now.
Amen.
Thanks, everybody. Senator, you have any closing comments?
Thank
you for having us.
Oh, thank you. Mike, you know what? You heard from the hardworking men and women that run the farms in our great state of Michigan. Go get her done.
Let's get her done.
Get her done.
Thanks, everybody. Hope you have great yield this year. Thanks.